Welcome to Still Science Lab. Tonight, we explore about beyond the particle. What is energy really made of? We live our lives entirely immersed in a concept that we use every day, yet fundamentally fail to define. From the moment we wake up and feel the warmth of the morning sun against our skin, to the mechanical hum of the cars carrying us to work, we are constantly talking about, measuring, and consuming energy. We treat it as the ultimate currency of the cosmos. Our language is deeply structured around it. We say that we are running out of energy after a long day, that a battery is full of it, or that a raging storm possesses a terrifying amount of destructive power. In doing so, our minds quietly construct a profound, almost invisible illusion. We instinctively treat energy as if it were a physical substance. We imagine it as a cosmic fluid, a glowing ethereal juice, or a subtle invisible vapor that can be poured into an object, stored within its atoms, and then drained away when that object does work. This is the great intuition trap of human consciousness. We have mistaken a brilliant system of cosmic bookkeeping for a material thing you can hold in your hand. To understand how deeply this illusion is woven into our perception of reality, we only need to look at the most mundane, everyday experiences. Consider an automobile accelerating down an open highway. As the driver presses down on the pedal, fuel is drawn into the engine, where it ignites in a series of controlled, violent explosions. The pistons pump, the gears turn, and the heavy frame of the vehicle surges forward into the dark. In our ordinary way of thinking, we say that the chemical energy stored within the fuel has been liberated, pouring out into the metal and transforming into the kinetic energy of motion. If that car suddenly slams on its brakes, the vehicle grinds to a halt, and the brakes become fiercely hot to the touch. We tell ourselves that the motion did not simply vanish, but was converted instead into thermal energy, bleeding away into the cool night air as heat. Throughout this entire sequence, our brains track the energy as if it were water flowing through a complex network of pipes. We imagine it moving from the chemical bonds of the gasoline into the kinetic momentum of the wheels, and finally into the chaotic thermal agitation of the brake pads. It feels real. It feels substantial. It feels like a tangible thing that is merely changing its outfit as it moves from one physical container to another. We see the exact same logic play out when we look at a simple campfire crackling in the woods. As the dry logs burn, they cast a bright, flickering light across the forest and radiate a comforting warmth into the surrounding chill. We intuitively feel that the wood was a container holding onto a specific quantity of latent heat and light, and that the fire is simply releasing this hidden substance into the environment. Even the simple act of lifting a heavy weight reveals the absolute grip of this metaphor. Imagine bending down to pick up a heavy iron sphere from the ground. As you strain your muscles and lift it high above your head, you are doing physical work against the relentless downward pull of the earth. In the language of classical physics, you have transferred the energy from your body into the iron sphere, investing it with what we call gravitational potential energy. If you hold that sphere perfectly still in the air, nothing about it appears to have changed. It is the exact same temperature it was on the ground. Its color has not shifted. Its atoms are arranged in the exact same crystalline lattice. Yet, physics tells us that it is now fundamentally different. It is charged with a silent, hidden potential. If you let it go, that invisible potential instantly erupts into furious downward motion. Our intuition demands to know where that energy was hiding while the sphere was suspended in the air. Was it residing inside the iron atoms? Was it floating in the empty space between the sphere and the ground? It feels as though an invisible spirit was breathed into the metal, waiting for the moment of release. But when we step out of the comforting warmth of human intuition and enter the cold, uncompromising light of modern physics, this entire material narrative completely dissolves. The idea that energy is a physical fluid, a substance, or a distinct type of matter is a convenient fiction. It is a highly sophisticated, deeply useful metaphor designed by evolution to help a macroscopic species navigate a world of cause and effect, but it is not a scientific reality. If you were to take that moving car, that burning log, or that suspended iron sphere and dismantle them down to their absolute fundamental components, you would never find a single particle of pure energy. You cannot isolate it. You cannot trap it in a bottle. You cannot sweep a collection of energy into a pile and examine it under a microscope. If you peer into the heart of an atom, you will find protons, neutrons, and electrons. If you look closer, you will find quarks and gluons. But you will never encounter a substance called energy clinging to them. Matter is made of components, but energy is not made of parts. It has no mass of its own, no color, no texture, and no independent existence outside of the systems that display it. This realization forces us to confront a deeply unsettling, central question that lies at the very heart of modern science. If energy is not a physical substance, if it is not a cosmic fluid or a material thing, then what is it? Is it merely a clever mathematical abstraction, a phantom number created by human minds to keep track of the chaotic changes in our ledger of the universe? Or is it something far more profound, an invisible reality that is intricately, indissolubly woven into the very fabric of space-time? To find out, we have to look closely at what the mathematics is actually doing. In the mid-19th century, as industrial engines began to reshape the globe, physicists realized that no matter what kind of physical transformation took place, whether a steam engine turned heat into motion or a battery turned chemical reactions into electricity, there was a specific mathematical quantity that always remained perfectly, flawlessly constant. If you precisely calculated the motion, the heat, the light, and the electrical current before an event, and added them all together using the correct conversion factors, that final number would always match the sum of the system after the event. This is the law of the conservation of energy, the celebrated first law of thermodynamics. It is the absolute bedrock of physical science. But when you look closely at the definition of energy that emerged from this era, it feels strangely hollow. Physics, textbooks define energy simply as the capacity to do work. And how do we define work? Work is the application of a force over a distance. Notice the circularity hidden within this logic. Energy is defined by its ability to do work, and work is defined by the movement of matter through space. The mathematics does not tell us what energy is. It only tells us what energy does. It tells us how much one state of matter can alter another state of matter. The legendary physicist Richard Feynman famously captured the surreal nature of this abstraction. He compared energy to a collection of indestructible toy blocks owned by a child. The child plays with the blocks, hiding them in boxes, throwing them behind the sofa, and burying them in the garden. No matter how chaotic the room becomes, if the mother knows the total number of blocks the child started with, she can use a meticulous system of accounting to find them all. She can weigh the toy box, measure the height of the sofa cushion, and calculate exactly how many blocks must be hidden out of sight. Feynman pointed out that in our study of the universe, we have discovered a magnificent mathematical property just like those blocks. It is a calculated number that never changes, no matter how violently the universe shifts, explodes, or decays. We can calculate the energy of motion, the energy of height, the energy of heat, and the energy of magnetic fields. We add them up, and the ledger always balances. But Feynman left us with a chilling, profound warning. He reminded us that in modern physics, we have absolutely no knowledge of what energy actually is. We do not view it as a collection of physical blocks. We only know that it is an abstract, numerical quantity that remains completely invariant throughout the passage of time. For a long time, this mathematical view led many to believe that energy was nothing more than a convenient human invention. It was argued that the universe doesn't actually care about energy. Only human accountants do. We created the concept to bring order to the overwhelming chaos of a changing world. building an intellectual bridge between a falling apple and a burning star. But this view of energy as a mere human abstraction was completely shattered by one of the most brilliant breakthroughs in the history of theoretical physics. In the early 20th century, a mathematician named Emmy Noether uncovered a deep, hidden link between the conservation laws of our universe and the fundamental symmetries of nature itself. Noether proved that whenever the laws of nature remain perfectly symmetrical under a certain change, a corresponding property of the universe must be perfectly conserved. Specifically, she demonstrated that the conservation of energy is the direct, mathematical consequence of a symmetry known as time translation invariance. This sounds deeply technical, but its philosophical weight is immense. Time translation invariance simply means that the laws of physics do not change from one moment to the next. The rules of gravity, electromagnetism, and nuclear forces are exactly the same tonight as they were yesterday, and exactly the same as they will be 1 billion years from now. The universe does not alter its core programming as it ages. Noether's mathematics revealed that because the laws of nature are completely indifferent to the flow of time, there must be a numerical quantity within the universe that is perfectly preserved across time. That quantity is energy. Suddenly, energy was no longer just an arbitrary bookkeeping tool invented by human minds to monitor industrial steam engines. It was unmasked as an intrinsic, structural feature of reality. The conservation of energy is not a rule imposed upon the cosmos. It is a profound echo of the universe's absolute constancy. Energy is the mathematical expression of nature's fidelity to its own laws across the vast, unfolding expanse of time. Yet, even as Noether's theorem elevated energy from a human abstraction to a fundamental truth, it did not solve the deeper, existential mystery. If energy is the echo of time symmetry, what is the actual mechanism that allows it to interact with our world? If it isn't a physical substance, why can it burn our skin? Why can it fuel the growth of a living cell, accelerate a galaxy, or detonate a star? How can a phantom property of accounting possess such a violent, tangible, and absolute grip on the material world? The answer to this mystery did not lie in the familiar, macroscopic world of classical mechanics, nor did it lie within the elegant equations of time symmetry. To discover what energy is truly made of, we had to abandon our senses entirely. We had to realize that our human eyes and our biological intuitions are profoundly deceptive instruments. We look out at the world and we see a reality made entirely of nouns. We see discrete, solid, well-defined objects. We see a rock sitting on the ground, a tree rooted in the dirt, a cloud drifting in the sky, and a human being standing in a room. We treat these objects as the primary reality, and we view energy as a secondary property, a transient quality that these nouns can occasionally possess, exchange, or lose. But as physics pushed its awareness deeper into the microscopic dark, past the atom and into the fluid realm of quantum physics, it revealed that this noun-based worldview is a colossal evolutionary illusion. When you strip away the macroscopic scale, the universe is not made of solid objects at all. It is not a stage filled with permanent things that occasionally contain energy. The reality is precisely the reverse. The universe is not made of nouns. It is made entirely of verbs. It is not made of things. It is made of processes, transitions, and continuous fluctuations. The solidity of the rock, the permanence of the tree, and the heavy reality of your own body are actually highly convincing macroscopic illusions. They are the stable, long-term patterns generated by an underlying reality that is completely fluid, deeply chaotic, and perpetually in motion. What we call matter is not the opposite of energy. It is merely energy that has been slowed down, localized, and trapped in a state of eternal, modern resonance. This realization marks the true exit from the intuition trap. We must train our minds to stop asking what energy is made of, as if it were a physical house built out of smaller bricks. we must begin to understand that energy is the fundamental vocabulary of change itself. It is the measure of the universe's capacity to alter its own geometry, to shift its states, and to communicate with its various parts across the void. This perspective shifts our entire understanding of existence from a mechanical clockwork machine to a grand, cosmic symphony. In a clockwork universe, you can remove a gear, isolate it on a table, and understand its shape in perfect isolation. But in a universe built upon the fluid laws of quantum physics, you cannot isolate a single piece of reality from the continuous flow of change that defines it. When we look at ourselves through this lens, the boundaries of our individual identities begin to soften into something deeply profound and faintly mysterious. We are accustomed to thinking of ourselves as solid biological structures, independent entities that walk through a cold, indifferent landscape, consuming energy from food to keep our internal engines running. We view ourselves as the containers and energy as the fuel. But the truth is far more breathtaking. You are not a container holding on to energy. You are the energy itself, temporarily organized into an unimaginably complex, self-sustaining pattern. The carbon, oxygen, and hydrogen atoms currently forming the architecture of your flesh are not static building blocks. They are highly localized, intensely active configurations of kinetic and potential energy, continuously exchanging phantom forces with the vacuum around them. The energy that animates your mind, the electrical currents flashing across the synapses of your brain, and the thermal warmth radiating from your skin are not separate from the grander energetic flow of the cosmos. They are direct continuations of a process that began 13.8 billion years ago, when the universe first erupted out of a hot, dense, and incomprehensible origin. That initial spark of energy has never vanished. It has merely spent billions of years transforming, shifting its shape, and flowing through an infinite variety of forms. It has been trapped in the hearts of ancient stars, scattered across the intergalactic void by supernovas, and gathered together to form the oceans, the atmosphere, and the soil of a rocky planet. Tonight, a tiny, localized fraction of that primordial energy has organized itself into the specific configuration required to generate your conscious mind. It is temporarily vibrating in the unique harmony that allows you to experience wonder, to feel the passage of time, and to contemplate the very laws that govern your existence. We are not passive observers placed into a universe filled with energy. We are the universe's energy, momentarily stepping out of the chaotic rush of the subatomic storm to look back at itself, trying to decode the mysterious source code of its own nature. We went searching for the solid, tangible bedrock of the world, hoping to find a quiet, comfortable reality made of solid marbles and empty space. Instead, we have been forced to dismantle our oldest, most deeply cherished intuitions. We have discovered that the universe refuses to be simple, refuses to be static, and refuses to be made of distinct, isolizable things. We are trapped in a magnificent illusion of solidity, forever shielded by our senses from the fluid, vibrating reality that rolls beneath us. To understand the true nature of energy is to finally step beyond the particle, to let go of the need for material certainty, and to accept that we are part of an eternal, unfolding motion, a beautiful, temporary ripple propagating across an infinite, invisible ocean that has never slept and will never truly die. To truly understand the nature of energy, we must first confront the absolute deepest lie whispered to us by our daily senses. It is a lie so ancient, so fundamental to human survival, that we rarely ever think to question it. It is the myth of the empty stage. From the moment we open our eyes as infants, our minds divide the universe into two distinct categories. On one hand, there are the things, the solid, tangible objects that occupy our world, the trees, the rocks, the buildings, and the bodies of the people we love. On the other hand, there is the space between those things. We treat that space as a vast, passive, and entirely empty canvas. We view it as a silent container, a neutral backdrop, a grand cosmic box waiting to be filled with the active ingredients of reality. When an object moves, we imagine it gliding effortlessly through a passive void, completely unhindered by the nothingness surrounding it. If we were to gather up every single star, every drifting planet, every atom of stray gas, and every stray photon of light in the cosmos and violently rip them out of existence, our intuition tells us exactly what would remain. We believe we would be left with a pure, pristine, and perfectly quiet absolute nothingness. An infinite, dark room with the lights turned off. This is the fallacy of the container. It is a magnificent intellectual illusion that has dominated human philosophy and physical science for thousands of years. But as we pushed our understanding into the deepest architectures of the universe, modern physics did not merely update this classical worldview. It violently abolished it. The ancient Greek philosophers were among the first to formalize this container model of reality. Democritus and his followers posited that the universe was ultimately composed of only two things: atoms and the void. In their view, the void was the absolute absence of being. It was a literal vacuum, a completely sterile space whose only function was to provide a stage where the solid, uncuttable atoms could move, collide, and hook together to form the material world. In this primitive framework, matter was the absolute king of reality. Matter was substantial, permanent, and real. The void was simply the empty theatre where the drama of matter took place. When Isaac Newton laid the mathematical foundations of classical mechanics in the 17th century, he preserved this ancient intuition, elevating the empty stage into a rigorous physical principle. Newton defined space as an absolute, rigid, three-dimensional grid that existed entirely independent of anything contained within it. To Newton, space was the ultimate passive container. It was an unchanging, unmoving, and infinite box. If you dropped a particle into this box, the particle possessed a definite position, a definite mass, and a definite velocity. If the particle accelerated, it accumulated a mathematical property called kinetic energy. Throughout this classical epoch, energy was viewed merely as a secondary characteristic, an accidental modifier of matter. A particle was a real thing. Energy was just a number we calculated to describe how fast that real thing was moving through the empty stage. If the particle stopped moving, its kinetic energy vanished back into the mathematical ether. If you removed the particle from the room entirely, the space it once occupied remained completely intact, utterly silent, and profoundly indifferent. Space did nothing to the particle, and the particle did nothing to space. They were entirely separate entities, locked in a relationship where space was the dead stage and matter was the lone, active actor. This model of reality was undeniably brilliant. It allowed us to calculate the orbits of the planets, predict the trajectories of cannonballs, and build the mechanical engines of the Industrial Revolution. But it contained a fatal, deeply unsettling flaw that even Newton himself recognized. If space is a truly passive, empty void, a literal nothingness, how does a physical force travel across it? When you release an apple from your hand, it immediately accelerates toward the ground. How does the Earth, thousands of miles beneath the apple, reach out through the absolute vacuum of space to pull the apple down? How does the sun exert a powerful, unyielding grip on the Earth across 93 million miles of supposedly empty void? The classical framework had no real answer. It was forced to rely on the deeply unscientific concept of action at a distance. It suggested that forces could somehow leap across a sterile nothingness instantaneously, without any material medium to carry them. It was a mathematical success built upon a physical absurdity. The first grand historical shift away from the fallacy of the container began in the 19th century with the discovery of electromagnetism. When physicists began to study the strange behaviors of magnets and electrical currents, they realized that the classical idea of an empty stage was rapidly becoming untenable. If you place two magnets near each other on a table, they will violently attract or repel one another without ever physically touching. To explain this mystery without resorting to magic, Michael Faraday proposed a radical new concept. He suggested that space was not empty at all. Instead, he posited that a magnet alters the very fabric of the space surrounding it, filling the room with an invisible, structural tension that he called a field. When a second magnet is placed into this space, it isn't reacting to the distant magnet across a void. It is directly feeling the localized stress and strain of the field right where it is sitting. Space was no longer just a passive box. It was starting to grow handles. It was beginning to display a physical texture. This conceptual crack in the empty stage widened into a massive, irreversible chasm with the arrival of Albert Einstein and his theory of general relativity. Einstein looked at the problem of gravity and realized that the classical container model was fundamentally wrong. Space is not a rigid, unchanging grid. It is an active, dynamic, and flexible fabric. Space-time can be bent, stretched, twisted, and warped by the presence of mass and energy. When the Earth orbits the Sun, it is not being pulled by an invisible, magical rope stretching across a void. The massive bulk of the Sun warps the very geometry of the space surrounding it, creating a deep gravitational well. The Earth simply glides along the natural, geometric curves of this warped space. In the grand view of general relativity, the stage is no longer passive. The stage has stood up and joined the play. The geometry of space directly dictates how matter moves, and the presence of matter directly dictates how space warps. Yet, even as general relativity transformed space from a dead container into a flexible, geometric sheet, it still preserved a lingering remnant of our ancient intuition. It still treated space as a canvas upon which the stars and planets were drawn. It suggested that if you could somehow smooth out all the warps, if you could remove all the heavy matter and energy, you would still be left with a quiet, flat, and ultimately empty geometric grid. The void was still, at its core, a vacuum. It was only when humanity finally descended into the subatomic basement and unleashed the radical framework of quantum field theory that the fallacy of the container was completely and permanently shattered. Quantum field theory did not just make the stage active, it entirely abolished the concept of the void. It looked at the ancient divide between the container and the contained, between space and matter, and it revealed that this divide is a total fiction. In the modern quantum paradigm, space is not an empty bucket waiting to be filled with particles. Space is the medium itself. To understand this profound inversion of reality, we must completely throw away the idea that the universe is made of fundamental particles dropping into space. Instead, quantum field theory tells us that the entire cosmos is completely filled with an interconnected matrix of continuous, fluid-like entities called quantum fields. There is an electron field, an electromagnetic field, a Higgs field, and a quark field. These fields are not floating in space. They are the very fabric of space itself. They fill every single coordinate of the universe, stretching from the interior of your cells to the furthest, darkest horizons of the cosmic web. You cannot escape them. You cannot step outside of them. There is no place in the cosmos where they do not exist. In this revolutionary framework, the concept of a solid, independent particle completely vanishes. A particle is not a tiny, localized marble dropped into a passive container. A particle is an excitation of the field. It is a localized, vibrating ripple within the invisible ocean that fills the room. Think of a vast, calm ocean stretching out in all directions. If the water is perfectly still, you see nothing but a smooth, featureless surface. But if you disturb the water, if you inject energy into it, a wave will form. That wave can travel across the ocean, carrying energy and momentum from one shore to another. If you look at the wave from a distance, it might appear to be a distinct, independent object moving across the water. But if you zoom in, you realize there is no separate object there at all. There is only the water, temporarily rising and falling in a localized pattern of motion. The wave is not in the ocean. The wave is a behavior of the ocean. This is exactly what an electron is. The universe is completely saturated by a continuous, invisible ocean called the electron field. When that field is injected with energy, it shudders. It vibrates. A tiny, localized ripple forms within the fabric of the field. To our crude, macroscopic senses and our primitive laboratory instruments, that localized ripple presents itself as a distinct, solid particle with a negative electrical charge. We name it an electron. But in the true architecture of reality, there is no particle. There is only the electron field in a state of localized agitation. This realization completely flips the classical relationship between matter and energy. In the old, intuitive worldview, matter was the primary reality, and energy was just a passive property that matter could carry. Quantum field theory reveals that fields and energy are the primary, fundamental reality of the cosmos, and what we call matter is merely a secondary phenomenon. Matter is just an excited state of the vacuum. If you want to understand what a solid object like a stone actually is, you must look past the illusion of its physical boundaries. The stone is not a collection of tiny, solid spheres sitting inside an empty room. The stone is a place where the universal fields are boiling with immense, localized energy. The quark fields are violently vibrating, exchanging furious ripples with the gluon fields to bind themselves into protons and neutrons. The electron field is humming with precise, geometric tension, casting electromagnetic waves into the dark to push against neighboring atoms. The stone is a highly concentrated, beautifully orchestrated storm of field excitations. It is a knot of energy tied into the continuous fabric of space. This means that the absolute vacuum we once imagined, the sterile, quiet void of Democritus and Newton, is a mathematical impossibility. You can never truly empty a room. If you build a thick box of lead and pump out every single atom of gas, if you chill it down to absolute zero to strip away all thermal heat, and if you shield it perfectly from all incoming cosmic radiation, the interior of that box is still not empty. The quantum fields are still there. They cannot be turned off. They cannot be removed from the coordinates of space because they are the coordinates of space. And because of the unyielding laws of quantum mechanics, specifically the uncertainty principle, a quantum field can never sit perfectly still. It is forbidden from achieving absolute rest. A field that is perfectly calm would have a precisely defined value of zero energy and a precisely defined rate of change of zero, which would violently violate the fundamental fuzziness of nature. Therefore, even in the deepest, most pristine vacuum imaginable, the underlying fields are constantly trembling. They are locked in a state of perpetual, restless vibration. If you could zoom in with infinite precision on a patch of supposedly empty space, you would not see a sterile void. You would see a blinding, chaotic, and violently active ocean of energy. The fields are constantly fluctuating, tossing up phantom ripples that tear into and out of existence in fractions of a microsecond. Virtual particles are spontaneously born from the vacuum, dancing together in pairs of matter and antimatter before crashing back into each other and annihilating back into the field. The vacuum is not dead space. It is a boiling, roaring cauldron of latent energy. It is a plenum, a space that is absolutely, completely full. This realization forces a profound, deeply disruptive shift in our philosophical understanding of the universe. It means that the long-standing existential battle between something and nothing is entirely over. Nothingness does not exist. The universe has never contained a single millimeter of true void. There is no empty canvas upon which the cosmos is painted. There is only the canvas itself, infinitely deep, intensely active, and continuously vibrating. When we look out at the deep intergalactic trenches of space, the vast, terrifying voids that lie between the glowing filaments of the cosmic web. We often feel a sense of profound existential dread. We view those regions as cosmic deserts, infinite expanses of dead, sterile nothingness that separate the lonely islands of matter. But quantum field theory reveals that those cosmic voids are not empty deserts at all. They are merely places where the universal fields are sitting in their lowest possible energy state. They are calm seas, but the water is still entirely there. The intergalactic dark is just as rich, just as full, and just as mathematically complex as the dense, boiling interior of a raging star. The fields are still trembling there, still humming with zero-point energy, still waiting for the spark that will summon new ripples into the physical world. This completely rewires our understanding of our own physical place in the cosmos. We are raised to believe that we are separate, isolated entities traveling through an empty world. We view our skin as the absolute, uncompromising border that separates our living, breathing self from the cold, dead vacuum of the room. We think of ourselves as passengers walking across the empty stage of space. But once you abolish the void, this isolation completely evaporates. You are not a passenger moving through an empty container. You are a localized ripple moving through a continuous, universal medium. The fields that vibrate to form the electrons and quarks of your body are the exact same fields that form the air in the room, the ground beneath your feet, and the distant, burning stars at the edge of the observable universe. There is no separation. There is no line in the sand where space ends and your body begins. You are a dense, highly organized, and exquisitely beautiful disturbance within the single, continuous fabric of reality. Your movement through a room is not an object traveling through a vacuum. It is a wave pattern propagating through an unbroken, multi-layered ocean of energy. This perspective brings a deep, almost serene sense of cosmic unity. But it also introduces a profound mystery regarding the nature of information and consciousness. If the entire universe is a single, continuous plenum, an infinite, vibrating fluid of fields, how does this fluid manage to organize itself into structures capable of memory, thought, and self-awareness? How does a universal medium turn around and look at its own texture? It suggests that reality is ultimately not an assembly of material things, but a grand hierarchy of organized information. The fields provide the medium, energy provides the motion, but the specific configuration of the ripples, the structural harmony of the waves, is what grants our world its texture, its beauty, and its conscious awareness. We are the ways in which the cosmic medium thinks. We are the configurations of the vacuum that have learned to speak, to wonder, and to map the very ocean that carries us. We went searching for the solid, uncuttable truth of the world, hoping to find clear, simple boundaries between the objects we see and the space they occupy. Instead, we have been forced to look past the illusion of the container and accept a reality that is infinitely more fluid and interconnected. The empty stage was a comfortable human myth, an evolutionary shortcut that kept us blind to the true depth of the cosmos. Space is not a passive box. It is the absolute arena of all physical existence, a restless, roaring canvas of quantum fields that never sleeps. We are not strangers walking through a dead void. We are the ripples of the void itself, beautifully and hopelessly entangled with an infinite ocean of energy that has been singing its silent, subatomic song since the very dawn of time. For centuries, human beings have been captivated by the idea of the ultimate building block. We are a species that constructs. We build our homes from cut stone, our machines from forged steel, and our cities from poured concrete. Because we interact with the world by assembling smaller pieces into larger structures, we naturally assumed that the universe must operate on the exact same architectural logic. We believed that if we could just peel back the layers of reality, If we could shatter the rocks, split the molecules, and crack open the atoms, we would eventually reach the basement of existence. We expected to find tiny, indestructible pebbles of matter. We wanted a hard, physical floor to stand on, a solid foundation from which everything else in the cosmos was constructed. But when we finally built machines powerful enough to tear open the atomic core, we did not find the solid floor we were looking for. The basement of reality was completely empty of anything resembling physical matter. Instead of finding tiny, rigid spheres of existence, we found an architecture that defies every instinct of our biological senses. We discovered that the universe is not made of parts. It is made of music. It is composed of vast, invisible, fluid-like mediums that stretch across the infinite expanse of the cosmos. To truly understand the nature of reality, and to finally grasp what energy actually is, we must abandon the language of solid objects and embrace the profound, trembling architecture of the quantum field. To visualize a quantum field, you must strip away your intuition of empty space. Imagine standing on the shore of a vast, midnight ocean that stretches out infinitely in all directions. If the wind dies down entirely, the water becomes perfectly still. The surface turns into a smooth, dark mirror reflecting the sky. In this state of absolute calm, the ocean is nearly invisible. It has no features, no movement, and no discernible shape. You might not even realize it is there. In the language of theoretical physics, this perfectly still ocean represents a quantum field in its resting state, otherwise known as the vacuum state. The field is present everywhere, occupying every inch of space, but because it is completely quiet, it produces no physical effects that we can detect. It is the silent backdrop of the universe. Now, imagine that a sudden, violent storm rolls in across the dark water. The wind tears across the surface, injecting motion and turbulence into the ocean. The flat mirror shatters. The water is forced out of its resting state, rising into towering, heavy crests and plunging into deep, turbulent troughs. A massive wave begins to propagate across the surface, rolling steadily toward the horizon. If you were observing this wave from a great distance, your brain would naturally track it as if it were a distinct, solid object traveling across the water. But you know that the wave is not an object. The water itself is not traveling from one side of the ocean to the other. The individual drops of water are merely moving up and down in place. The wave is a behavior. It is a transmission of momentum, a localized disturbance passing through the medium. The wave is not a thing. It is the ocean in a state of temporary agitation. This is precisely how reality is constructed at the most fundamental level. The universe is completely filled with an invisible, continuous ocean called the electron field. This field permeates everything. It exists in the empty space between the stars. It exists inside the deepest trenches of the earth, and it exists perfectly unbroken throughout the room you are currently sitting in. Most of the time, in most places, this field is perfectly calm and completely undetectable. But when this field is agitated, when a mathematical tension is injected into its fabric, it shudders. A localized ripple forms and begins to propagate through the invisible medium. To our crude, macroscopic senses and our most advanced laboratory detectors, that tiny, localized ripple appears as a solid point of matter. It registers as a distinct, sharply defined entity with a specific mass and a negative electrical charge. We point to that ripple and we call it an electron. But the electron is not a little bullet fired through an empty room. The electron is just a wave on the water. It is an excitation of the underlying field. There is no isolated particle there. There is only the continuous, universal field, momentarily trapped in a state of restless vibration. This revelation completely destroys our conventional understanding of energy. We are raised to think of energy as a glowing, ethereal fluid that can be poured into an object, or as a hidden substance locked away inside the belly of a particle. We treat energy like a passenger riding inside the vehicle of matter. But quantum field theory reveals that this is a fundamental category error. Energy is not a passenger. Energy is not a fluid, and it is certainly not a substance. Energy is the agitation itself. Energy is the exact mathematical measure of how violently the underlying field has been forced out of its quiet resting state. When we say that a particle possesses high energy, we are simply describing the amplitude and frequency of the ripple within the quantum medium. The field does not contain energy the way a cup contains water. The field is the energy when it is in motion. Energy is the vocabulary of change, the degree of departure from absolute stillness. It is the verb of existence, not the noun. When an electron travels across a laboratory or across the vast interstellar void, there is no physical material moving through space. The fundamental fabric of the cosmos is simply vibrating in a highly specific, organized sequence. The momentum is handed off from one coordinate of the field to the next, much like a shout traveling through the air. The sound of a voice is just the rhythmic compression of atmospheric gases, transferring energy from one molecule to another. The sound is not a physical object, and neither is the electron. They are both pure motion, cascading through their respective mediums. But reality is far more intricate and far more deeply strange than a single ocean. If the universe were composed of only the electron field, it would be an incredibly dull and sterile place. It would be a cosmos populated entirely by solitary ripples of negative charge, repelling one another in a dark, formless expanse. The true majesty of the universe, the breathtaking complexity that allows for stars, planets, and conscious life, arises from a reality that is almost impossible for the human brain to visualize. There is not just one ocean, there are many, and they are completely, perfectly stacked on top of one another. Imagine isolating a single, microscopic coordinate of empty space. If you could zoom in on 1 cubic millimeter of the vacuum directly in front of you, you would find that it is not empty. It is saturated by the electron field. But occupying the exact same space, at the exact same time, is the up quark field. Overlaid perfectly onto that is the down quark field. Layered simultaneously through that exact same coordinate is the gluon field, the electromagnetic field, the Higgs field, and the neutrino fields. In our classical, everyday world, two physical objects cannot occupy the same space. A brick cannot sit in the exact same location as another brick. But quantum fields are not physical objects. They are mathematical mediums, invisible tapestries of potential that can overlap flawlessly without ever displacing one another. They permeate the cosmos concurrently. They are coextensive, meaning that right here, right now, in the space passing through your own body, the entire catalogue of universal fields is fully present, resting silently on top of one another like a stack of infinitely thin, invisible veils. This overlapping tapestry of quantum fields is the true fundamental substance of reality. It is the absolute bedrock of existence. The universe is a stacked harmony of these mediums, a deeply layered canvas where the laws of physics are written in the language of vibration. To understand how the physical world is built from this tapestry, we have to look at how these different fields interact. Because these fields overlap in the exact same coordinates of space, they have the ability to listen to one another. They can feel the vibrations of their neighbors. When a ripple travels through the up quark field, and a ripple travels through the down quark field, they do not simply pass through each other in silence. Their vibrations catch the attention of the gluon field that perfectly overlaps them both. The gluon field is the medium responsible for the strong nuclear force. When it senses the agitation of the quarks, the gluon field begins to violently erupt with its own ripples. It binds the quark excitations together in a ferocious, inescapable resonance. This tightly bound knot of localized, overlapping waves becomes incredibly stable. To the outside world, this violent, microscopic storm of interacting fields presents a single, unified face. We call this stable storm a proton. every proton in the universe, including the trillions currently anchoring the atomic structure of your own body, is nothing more than this exact chord being struck across the quark and gluon fields. When you introduce the electron field into this local storm, the complexity scales up beautifully. The electron field ripples, creating an electron that circles the proton storm. But it does not orbit like a planet around a sun. It exists as a cloud of probability, a smeared-out vibration locked in a delicate dance with the proton. They communicate their positions to one another by constantly agitating the electromagnetic field that overlaps them both, exchanging invisible, fleeting ripples of light. This delicate, balanced architecture of interacting ripples is what we call an atom. And from this point, the tapestry simply folds onto itself in grander and grander patterns. Atoms bond together into molecules by harmonizing the vibrations of their outer electron fields. Molecules fold into towering proteins and intricate strands of DNA. Cells build themselves from these vibrating molecular chains. And ultimately, these cells organize into the walking, breathing, and conscious entity that you call yourself. We must pause here to truly absorb the crushing philosophical weight of this reality. You are accustomed to viewing yourself as a biological machine. You see skin, bone, and blood. You feel the heavy, solid reality of your own mass pushing against the earth. But physics demands that you strip away this comforting illusion. Beneath the biological machinery, beneath the chemistry, and beneath the atomic structure, there is no solid material. There is no heavy dirt. There is only the tapestry of overlapping fields. You are not a static object placed into the theater of the universe. You are a highly specific, localized symphony playing across the fundamental mediums of reality. The quark fields are humming to create the heavy core of your mass. The gluon field is roaring with tension to hold those cores together. The electron field is singing a complex, mathematical song that defines the chemical boundaries of your flesh. And the electromagnetic field is flashing with continuous, invisible light, carrying the electrical impulses of your nervous system and the conscious architecture of your thoughts. You are an event. You are a temporary, exquisitely organized harmonic structure. You are a standing wave propagating through an ocean of invisible tension. When you raise your hand, you are not moving a solid object through empty space. You are simply shifting the location of the disturbance. The sequence of vibrations is smoothly handed off from one coordinate of the quantum fields to the next. The energy flows, the pattern translates, and the ripples seamlessly travel through the universal mediums without ever truly carrying any solid material with them. We are literally made of motion. This realization completely changes what it means to be alive in the cosmos. For most of our history, humanity has felt a deep sense of alienation from the universe. We looked up at the cold, silent stars and felt disconnected, like fragile biological accidents stranded on a dead rock. We separated ourselves from the void. We built an absolute intellectual wall between the living and the non-living, between the observer and the observed. But when you understand the quantum symphony, that wall completely shatters. There is no separation between you and the deepest expanses of the cosmos. The electron field that currently forms the chemistry of your heart is the exact same, unbroken field that forms the crushing outer shell of a neutron star a billion light-years away. The quark fields that anchor your DNA are the exact same continuous oceans that boiled in the first microscopic fraction of a second after the Big Bang. You are intimately, physically, and mathematically woven into the absolute fabric of everything that exists. You are not a stranger in this universe. You are an extrusion of it. Energy is not a magical substance that grants life to dead matter. It is the fundamental restlessness of the cosmos. It is the universe's inability to sit still. Because the quantum fields are forbidden from achieving absolute silence, they must constantly tremble. They must constantly cast ripples into the dark. And out of that eternal, restless agitation, the universe managed to weave a pattern so deeply complex, so harmonically perfect, that the pattern learned how to turn around and contemplate the very oceans that birthed it. We are not things. We are the music of the fields, a beautiful, vibrating resonance momentarily echoing in the dark. We are the universe experiencing its own profound capacity for change. And as long as the fields continue to tremble, as long as the quantum symphony continues to play, the illusion of reality will persist, hiding the infinite, roaring oceans just beneath the surface of the world. Press your hand firmly against a solid wall. Feel the cold, unyielding resistance of the stone pushing back against the warmth of your skin. This is the most fundamental, intuitive experience of physical reality. It is the sensation of contact. Your brain instantly translates this resistance into a story about the world. It tells you that your body is a distinct, solid object, and the wall is another distinct, solid object. And right now, the boundaries of those two objects are aggressively colliding. It feels absolute. It feels like the ultimate proof that the universe is made of hard, physical matter occupying empty space. But this entire sensory experience is a highly convincing hallucination. At the absolute fundamental level of reality, nothing is touching. In fact, the very concept of two solid objects making contact is a complete physical impossibility. When you press your hand against the wall, you are not feeling the collision of microscopic billiard balls. You are experiencing a violent, invisible storm of mathematical transactions. You are feeling the relentless transfer of energy between invisible oceans. If we accept the profound truth that the universe is not made of tiny, hard particles, but is instead composed of continuous, overlapping quantum fields, we are immediately confronted by a massive, glaring mystery. A fundamental paradox arises. In our ordinary experience with fields and waves, like the ripples on the surface of a pond, waves do not crash into each other like solid objects. When two ocean waves meet, they do not bounce off one another. They smoothly overlap, their peaks and troughs momentarily combining, and then they pass right through each other, continuing on their respective journeys entirely unchanged. This is a basic property of waves known as superposition. But if the electrons in your hand are simply localized ripples in the universal electron field, and the atoms in the wall are just localized ripples in their own respective fields, why don't they just pass right through each other like ripples on a pond? Why do you feel a solid barrier? How can a wave of probability ever feel hard to the touch? If the universe were composed only of independent, isolated fields, reality would be a dark, silent place where nothing ever happened. The fields would overlap perfectly in the same coordinates of space, but they would be completely deaf and blind to one another. An electron ripple could pass perfectly through a quark ripple, and neither would ever register the existence of the other. For the universe to build structure, for it to forge stars, planets, and human biology, these invisible oceans must possess a mechanism to communicate. There must be a way for a disturbance in one field to reach out and dramatically alter the behavior of a completely different field. This brings us to the absolute core of what physical interaction actually is. In the quantum universe, an interaction is never a collision of solid bodies. An interaction is the exchange of energy. It is a highly specific, localized transaction. And just like any economy, this cosmic marketplace requires a currency. It requires a medium of exchange that allows momentum, charge, and force to be handed from one field to another across the microscopic void. To understand how this currency works, we have to strip away another deeply ingrained classical misconception. We are taught to think of forces as invisible tethers, like microscopic rubber bands stretching across space to pull things together, or invisible springs pushing them apart. But a force is not a static tether. A force is an active, continuous dialogue. When the negative charge of an electron in your hand comes dangerously close to the negative charge of an electron in the wall, they want to repel each other with ferocious intensity. But they cannot simply push each other directly. The electron field cannot touch itself to create a repulsive force. Instead, it must utilize an intermediary. It must hire a messenger. That messenger is the electromagnetic field. These two fields, the electron field and the electromagnetic field, are mathematically coupled together. They are intimately woven into each other's existence. When an electron ripple accelerates or is forced to change its momentum by an approaching barrier, it sheds a portion of its energy. But that energy does not simply vanish into the dark. It is instantly dumped into the overlapping electromagnetic field. This sudden injection of energy violently agitates the electromagnetic ocean, creating a new, highly specialized ripple. This secondary ripple tears across the microscopic gap at the absolute speed limit of the universe. When it strikes the opposing electron ripple in the wall, it dumps its energy back into the electron field, transferring the momentum and forcing the electron in the wall to violently recoil. We have a name for this microscopic, energetic messenger. We call it a photon. When you hear the word photon, your mind likely immediately conjures the image of a tiny, glowing bullet of light. We are taught that photons are the particles of illumination, the bright little packets of energy streaming out of the sun and striking our retinas. But this is an agonizingly limited view of what a photon truly is. Visible light is just one extraordinarily narrow frequency of this phenomenon. In its truest, most fundamental sense, a photon is the physical manifestation of the electromagnetic force itself. It is the physical currency of charge. A photon is not a little ball. It is a transient, migrating wave of pure intent. It is a localized packet of energy designed specifically to carry momentum from one charged ripple to another. When you press your hand against the wall, the feeling of pressure, the feeling of unquestionable physical solidity is entirely an electromagnetic illusion. The electron clouds of your atoms are coming close to the electron clouds of the wall's atoms, and the space between them erupts into a blinding, invisible storm of photon exchange. Trillions upon trillions of these messenger ripples are being violently fired back and forth, transferring energy, transferring momentum, and screaming at the electron fields to back away. Your brain interprets this torrential microscopic crossfire as a solid surface. Solid matter does not exist. There is only the resistance created by the furious exchange of light. This beautiful, continuous transaction of energy is not limited to the electromagnetic field. The entire architecture of the cosmos is built upon specialized fields whose sole purpose is to carry energy between the different domains of reality. They are the force carriers, the fundamental vocabulary of the universe's interactions. If we dive deeper, past the electron clouds and into the incredibly dense, terrifying heart of the atomic nucleus, we find a realm governed by rules far more violent than electromagnetism. Inside the nucleus, protons are packed so closely together that their electromagnetic repulsion should instantly tear the atom apart in a blinding explosion. The only reason the nucleus holds together, the only reason you are not instantly vaporized into a cloud of scattered radiation, is because of a different type of currency. Here, the quark fields are interacting with a medium called the gluon field. The gluon field is the carrier of the strong nuclear force. But unlike the electromagnetic field, which is relatively polite and allows things to push away from one another, the gluon field is incredibly aggressive. When quarks exchange energy by firing gluon ripples at one another, the interaction does not push them apart. It creates an almost unbreakable, elastic tension. The gluons are the physical manifestation of a force so intense that they actually carry the very charge they are transferring. It is an endless, roaring transaction, a furious storm of energy exchange that locks the quarks into a perfectly stable harmony. The vast majority of the mass of your body, the heavy, undeniable weight of your existence, does not come from the quarks themselves. It comes entirely from the immense, trapped energy of the gluon field desperately firing these force carriers back and forth to keep you in one piece. Your weight is quite literally the measure of this microscopic frenzy. Even the slow, invisible processes of the universe, like the radioactive decay that heats the core of the Earth and fuels the fiery hearts of distant quasars, are governed by this exact same logic. The weak nuclear force relies on the W and Z bosons, massive, sluggish ripples that transfer energy to facilitate the decay and transformation of particles. Every single event that has ever occurred in the history of the cosmos, from the gentle collision of two dust grains in the primordial solar nebula to the apocalyptic detonation of a dying star, is ultimately just an incomprehensible number of these localized energy transactions. This realization completely shifts our understanding of what it means for something to happen. In the human experience, an event is a macroscopic occurrence. A glass shatters, a car engine starts, a leaf falls from a branch. But at the resolution of the quantum fields, an event is always and only a transfer of energy via a force carrier. Nothing else ever occurs. Reality is an infinite ledger, and the laws of physics are merely the strict accounting rules that dictate how the energy currency can be spent, traded, and transformed between the various fields. And this cosmic marketplace never closes. It never rests. We tend to think that energy exchange only happens during dramatic moments of change, like a chemical explosion or a high-speed collision. But the quantum vacuum is a restless, chaotic arena that abhors silence. Even in the cold, empty space of a perfect vacuum, the fields are constantly whispering to each other. Because of the inherent uncertainty baked into the mathematical foundations of the universe, energy can be borrowed from the vacuum itself, as long as it is paid back almost instantly. This means that the empty space inside your atoms is filled with a churning sea of virtual photons. These are force carrier ripples that flash into existence for a billionth of a trillionth of a second, transfer a tiny fragment of momentum between the electron and the nucleus, and then vanish back into the field before the universe can permanently register their existence. This phantom exchange is happening endlessly, everywhere, all at once. The silent room you are sitting in is actually deafeningly loud with the roar of virtual transactions. It is a boiling soup of energy exchange that maintains the basic geometry of empty space and dictates the exact spectral signature of every element in the cosmos. To understand energy as the currency of interaction is to realize that our very existence is defined by our participation in this relentless dialogue. We are not static objects that occasionally interact with our environment. We are the interactions. Every sensation you have ever felt, every memory you have ever formed, every thought currently cascading through your conscious mind is the direct result of energy being handed from one invisible medium to another. Consider the sheer, overwhelming majesty of the simple act of looking at the night sky. When you step outside and look up at a faint, distant star, you are engaging in an energy transaction that spans the entire breadth of the universe. 1,000,000 years ago, in the crushing, superheated core of that star, the violent collision of fields birthed a photon. That tiny ripple of electromagnetic energy breached the surface of the star and began a journey across the terrifying expanse of deep space. It traveled through the freezing, silent void, completely untouched, perfectly preserving its specific packet of energy for 1,000,000 years. Tonight, it crossed the threshold of our atmosphere, traveled through the pupil of your eye, and crashed into the retina at the back of your skull. In that exact fraction of a millisecond, the photon ripple vanished. It dumped its 1,000,000-year-old energy directly into the electron field of a highly specific protein molecule in your biological hardware. That electron field shuddered, transferring the energy into a chemical cascade, firing an electrical signal down your optic nerve, and erupting into a cascade of new photon exchanges within the dark, folded architecture of your brain. And in that precise moment, you experienced the conscious sensation of seeing a star. You did not passively observe a distant object. You intimately, physically connected with it. The star reached across 1,000,000 light-years of empty space and handed a piece of its energy directly to you. That transaction altered the physical structure of your brain. You are materially different for having looked at it. This is the true nature of energy and interaction. It is not a sterile mechanical process of objects bouncing off one another in a dead void. It is a profoundly intimate, continuously unfolding physical communion. The universe is speaking to itself. The fields are exchanging the vocabulary of light, mass, and force, weaving a tapestry of such immense complexity that it allows us to feel warmth, to experience solidity, and to hold the illusion of permanence. When you truly internalize this, the boundaries between you and the rest of reality begin to dissolve. The air you breathe, the ground you walk on, the light that warms your skin. None of it is truly separate from you. You are deeply, hopelessly entangled in an infinite web of energy exchange. You are a localized nexus where trillions of transactions are clearing every single second, sustaining the fragile, beautiful standing wave of your identity. You are not a container holding energy. You are the very process of energy moving through the dark. To interact is to exist, and to exist is to burn with the invisible, eternal currency of the cosmos. Imagine taking a heavy, impenetrable vault of solid steel and sealing it tightly against the outside world. To understand the deepest, most terrifying secret of the quantum universe, we must first attempt an impossible physical task. We must try to construct absolute nothingness. Step by meticulous step, we strip the interior of the vault of all its contents. We use powerful industrial vacuums to pump out every single stray atom of atmospheric gas, leaving behind no air to carry sound, no molecules to transfer heat, and no dust to catch the light. We encase the vault in incredibly thick layers of lead and concrete, building a perfect shield to block out any stray radiation, ensuring that no photons from our sun, no cosmic rays from distant supernovas, and no wandering radio waves can pierce the interior darkness. Finally, we attach massive cryogenic engines to the outer hull and drag the internal temperature of the chamber down. We plunge past the freezing point of water, past the condensation point of liquid nitrogen, all the way down to the ultimate thermodynamic floor. We chill the interior to absolute zero. In the classical imagination, this isolated, frozen vault now represents the absolute limit of physical reality. It is the perfect vacuum. It is a space entirely stripped of matter, completely devoid of heat, and utterly empty of energy. For centuries, classical physics assured us that this vault would be a dead space, a sterile, perfectly silent tomb where nothing happens, nothing moves, and time itself essentially loses its meaning. If you have no matter to interact and no energy to cause change, you have no events. You have engineered a localized pocket of pure, unadulterated void. This is our fundamental, intuitive understanding of the dark. We look up at the vast, yawning stretches of black sky between the scattered stars, and we naturally assume that those freezing intergalactic spaces are dead. We believe that emptiness is simply the absence of things. But this intuition is a catastrophic, almost laughable failure of the human imagination. If you were to somehow shrink down to the size of an atom and step inside that perfectly sealed, frozen vault, you would not find a silent, dead void. You would step into a roaring, violently active storm. You would find a space that is physically, mathematically, and fundamentally incapable of sitting still. To comprehend why the universe absolutely refuses to be empty, we have to examine the absolute bedrock of quantum mechanics. There is a principle deeply encoded into the architecture of reality that is so fiercely uncompromising, it literally dictates the physical boundaries of existence. It is known as the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. Often, we hear this principle described as a mere limitation of human engineering or laboratory equipment. We are casually told that we cannot simultaneously measure the exact position and the exact momentum of a particle because the clumsy act of shining light on it knocks it off its course. But that is a profound misunderstanding of what the math is actually telling us. The uncertainty principle is not a statement about human ignorance. It is a fundamental law about the texture of nature itself. The universe strictly forbids absolute precision. It demands a baseline level of fuzziness, a built-in mathematical blurriness that prevents any physical property from being locked down to an exact, unchanging value. In the macroscopic world of our daily lives, we never notice this restriction. A parked car appears to have a precise location in the driveway and a velocity of exactly 0. But as you zoom down into the microscopic architecture of the cosmos, this rule becomes an absolute, tyrannical reality. And crucially, this rule applies to energy just as strictly as it applies to physical motion. In the quantum realm, there is a brutal, unyielding trade-off between time and energy. You can know the exact energy of a quantum system, or you can know the exact, instantaneous time frame in which you are observing it, but you can never, ever perfectly nail down both. The shorter the window of time you look at, the more wildly unpredictable and chaotic the energy of that space becomes. This mathematical law completely destroys the classical concept of the perfect vacuum. If you have a completely empty vault at absolute 0, and you claim that nothing is happening inside it, you are claiming to know the exact energy of that space. You are claiming the energy is exactly 0, and that it will remain exactly 0 forever. The universe simply will not allow this. Absolute 0 is illegal. Absolute emptiness is a mathematical impossibility, because the laws of physics violently reject the concept of a zero energy state. The underlying quantum fields that saturate our universe are strictly forbidden from resting. Even if you completely remove all the massive electrons, all the heavy quarks, and all the brilliant photons, even if you strip away every single distinct particle that constitutes the physical world, the fundamental fields themselves remain. You cannot remove the fields because the fields are the space itself. And because of the uncompromising blurriness of the uncertainty principle, these localized fields are forced to continuously tremble. They exist in a state of eternal, restless agitation. This underlying hum, this baseline vibration of the empty void, is known as zero-point energy. It is the absolute minimum possible energy that a physical system can possess, and that minimum is never 0. The vacuum is not a dead, empty stage. It is a highly energized, fiercely active, and profoundly tense medium. If you travel in your mind to the darkest, coldest, most terrifyingly remote stretch of the intergalactic void, millions of light years away from the nearest faint glow of a dying galaxy, that seemingly dead space is not asleep. It is vibrating with an intense, microscopic fury. The electromagnetic field is quietly shuddering in the pitch black. The invisible Higgs field is pulsing with a latent, heavy tension. The quark fields are locked in a microscopic, chaotic tremble. This means that the empty space inside the room you are sitting in right now, the space between your eyes and the screen, is teeming with an unfathomable amount of latent energy. It is an invisible ocean that is constantly churning beneath the smooth, calm surface of our daily reality. We do not feel this furious vibration because it is the baseline state of our existence. Just as a deep-sea creature does not feel the crushing, lethal weight of the water around it because its biology is perfectly adapted to the pressure, we do not feel the boiling energy of the vacuum because we are built entirely within it. It is the background static of the cosmos, the silent, invisible roar of existence that never, ever turns off. But this zero-point energy is not just a mathematical abstraction hidden away in the equations of theoretical physicists. It has terrifying, completely tangible consequences for the physical world. The trembling of these fields is so violent and so relentless that it constantly forces energy to briefly manifest as physical reality. Because energy and matter are intimately, flawlessly interchangeable, the boiling vacuum is capable of borrowing against the energetic bank of the universe to conjure physical matter completely out of nowhere. Within the deepest depths of the void, the trembling of the quantum fields will suddenly randomly spike, crossing a critical mathematical threshold, and the vacuum will literally tear open. Out of absolute nothingness, a pair of particles will violently erupt into existence. Typically, a particle of matter and its exact, destructive mirror image of antimatter, like a negative electron and a positive positron, will flash into the world together. For an incredibly brief fraction of a microsecond, they are entirely real. They possess actual mass. They carry real electrical charge. They push and pull against the space around them. But this existence is entirely illicit. They have borrowed the energy required to exist from the zero-point hum of the vacuum, and the universe is a ruthless, unforgiving debt collector. Almost the exact instant they are born, the two particles are violently drawn back toward one another by their opposing charges. They collide. They mutually annihilate in a microscopic flash of silent energy, and they return their borrowed mass back to the boiling vacuum. This furious, endless cycle of birth and death is known as quantum fluctuation. These fleeting, doomed ghosts are called virtual particles, and the vacuum is completely infested with them. Every single cubic inch of empty space in the universe is a roaring, boiling cauldron of this spontaneous creation and destruction. Trillions upon trillions of times every single second, in the empty space inside your lungs, inside the core of the earth, and in the frozen void of deep space, reality is bubbling up and popping back down. The vacuum is literally boiling with temporary life. If we possessed eyes sensitive enough to see down to the absolute microscopic floor of the quantum foam, space would not look like a dark, peaceful glass. It would look like the chaotic, violent, terrifying surface of a rolling, boiling liquid. The ramifications of this boiling vacuum are staggering, because this storm of ghosts directly dictates the shape and the stability of the physical world we actually live in. When a real, permanent particle, like one of the electrons currently orbiting the carbon atoms in your skin, moves through space, it is not flying through an empty room. It is forcing its way through this boiling, chaotic sea of virtual phantoms. The real electron is constantly being bombarded by these temporary ghosts. They flash into existence, shove aggressively against the real electron, alter its electromagnetic field, and vanish, subtly changing its path and modifying its energy. This means that the specific properties of all the physical matter we see around us are directly shaped by the ghosts of the vacuum. The exact mass of a particle, the precise strength of a magnetic field, the very way light bends and travels across the cosmos are all heavily influenced and tweaked by the constant background roaring of zero-point energy. Solid matter is simply the phenomenon that manages to survive and stabilize within the boiling sea. Reality, as we experience it, is just the macroscopic foam resting on top of these roiling, microscopic waves. This inescapable truth completely rewrites our understanding of cosmic interaction. The vacuum is so dense with latent energy that it actually exerts a physical pressure on the objects within it. If you were to take two perfectly smooth, uncharged plates of metal and place them incredibly close together in a perfect vacuum, something deeply counterintuitive happens. Because the plates are so close together, only virtual particles of a certain small wavelength can squeeze into the gap between them. But on the outside of the plates, in the vast, open ocean of the vacuum, virtual particles of all sizes and wavelengths are constantly violently boiling into existence. This creates a massive imbalance. The storm of ghosts hammering on the outside of the plates is far stronger than the storm brewing in the tiny gap between them. As a result, the boiling vacuum literally pushes the two metal plates together. Empty space exerts a crushing, physical force. When we scale this terrifying realization up from the microscopic foam to the grandest architecture of the cosmos, we run into one of the most profound, unsettling, and completely unresolved mysteries in the history of human thought. When astrophysicists look up at the night sky and measure the movement of distant galaxies, they find that the universe is tearing itself apart. The galaxies are not just drifting away from one another, they are accelerating. The very fabric of space-time is stretching faster and faster, driven by a massive, repulsive, invisible force that we ominously call dark energy. For decades, we have desperately tried to understand what this dark energy could possibly be. What invisible hand is pushing the universe toward a cold, lonely death? The most compelling, mathematically natural answer lies squarely within the boiling vacuum. Since empty space is not truly empty, since it is filled with this fierce, unending hum of zero-point energy, that massive reservoir of energy must possess a weight. It must exert a grand, cosmic pressure on the fabric of the universe itself. Many theoretical physicists believe that the boiling vacuum is the actual engine of our expanding reality. The violent, microscopic dance of virtual particles happening continuously in every single millimeter of empty space across the billions of light years of the cosmos may collectively push outward on reality, stretching the physical architecture of the universe further and further into the dark. In this view, the void is not merely a passive stage where the history of the universe plays out. The void is an active, aggressive, and dominant participant in the ultimate fate of the cosmic web. The very emptiness of space is what is tearing space apart. Yet, this creates a beautiful and agonizing tension in our understanding of physics. When we attempt to calculate exactly how much energy is locked inside the boiling vacuum, the equations break down in spectacular fashion. If you sum up the infinite frenzy of all the virtual particles constantly flashing in and out of existence, the mathematics suggests that the zero-point energy of a single coffee cup of empty space should contain enough latent power to instantly boil all the oceans on Earth. It suggests that the vacuum should be so incredibly dense with energy that its gravitational weight would cause the entire universe to instantly collapse in on itself, crushing all of space-time into a microscopic point. Obviously, that has not happened. The universe is vast, open, and capable of supporting fragile, beautiful things like galaxies, planets, and human life. The true energy of the vacuum, while undeniably real and constantly driving the acceleration of the cosmos, is somehow exquisitely, almost impossibly tuned to be just small enough to allow reality to exist, while still remaining relentless enough to slowly push the stars apart. We are suspended over an infinite abyss of boiling energy, perfectly balanced on a mathematical razor's edge. What does it actually mean to exist in a universe where nothingness is strictly, mathematically outlawed? We spend our entire lives blindly chasing stillness. We build soundproof rooms to escape the chaotic noise of the city. We seek out quiet forests and empty deserts to find peace. We close our eyes at night, hoping to slip effortlessly into the peaceful, silent void of sleep. Our entire psychological framework is built heavily around the comforting idea that rest is the default state of the world, and that action, movement, and chaos require effort. We desperately want to believe that if we just stop moving, the world will finally stop with us. But quantum physics tells us a completely different, deeply unnerving story. The fundamental foundation of your existence is built on an architecture of absolute, unrelenting insomnia. The universe does not know how to rest. It is constitutionally, mathematically incapable of peace. The empty space passing between the carbon atoms in your beating heart is currently boiling with the exact same violent intensity as the deepest, coldest expanse of intergalactic space. The emptiness inside you is a raging, infinite storm. You are not a solid, static object that occasionally interacts with an energetic world. You are a highly organized, temporary pattern of physical matter that is desperately trying to maintain its shape while swimming through a roaring, boiling ocean of phantom energy. The energy that makes up your reality is not a gentle fluid. It is a violent, restless, and completely inescapable vibration. We are born from the unrest. We are sustained by the friction of the trembling fields, and we are ultimately destined to return our borrowed energy back to the boiling dark. To look into the vacuum is not to look into the void. It is to look directly into the engine of existence, a blinding, eternal storm of energy that has never slept and will never, ever let us rest. Every time you take a step, you are forced to confront a deeply familiar, invisible resistance. You feel the heavy, unyielding pull of the earth against your bones. You feel the physical effort required to lift your own arm, the strain in your muscles when you push a heavy door, and the solid, undeniable momentum of a falling object. From the moment we are born, we intimately understand the concept of weight. We intuitively believe that some objects are simply heavier than others because they contain more physical substance. A stone feels heavier than a dry leaf because, in our minds, the stone is packed with more solid, tangible material. We treat mass as an intrinsic, permanent noun. We believe it is a fundamental property of matter, a heavy little core hidden away inside every single particle of our bodies. But as we peel back the layers of the quantum universe, this intuitive understanding completely falls apart. If we accept the profound truth that solid matter is an illusion, that reality is composed entirely of overlapping, vibrating fields of energy, we run into a massive, glaring contradiction. Waves on an ocean do not have solid cores. Ripples do not have intrinsic weight. If an electron is nothing more than a localized vibration propagating through an invisible medium, why does it feel heavy? Why does a stone resist being pushed? If the entire cosmos is just a symphony of moving energy, where does the crushing, undeniable reality of physical mass actually come from? To solve this mystery, we must first look at how the universe behaves when left entirely to its own devices. We have to strip away the complex architecture of atoms and stars and look at the absolute default state of raw, unhindered energy. When a ripple forms in a quantum field, its natural instinct is to move. And because the universe is fundamentally governed by a strict mathematical geometry of space-time, that movement has an absolute speed limit. We call it the speed of light. In the absence of any interference, a localized packet of energy will always naturally propagate through the void at this absolute maximum velocity. It will tear across the cosmos at 186,000 miles per second. We see this perfect, unhindered motion in the electromagnetic field. When a photon is born in the superheated core of a star, it does not slowly accelerate. It does not gradually build up speed. The exact instant it flashes into existence, it is already traveling at the absolute speed limit of the universe. It flies across the freezing vacuum of deep space for millions of years, perfectly preserving its momentum, entirely untouched and unbothered by the empty void around it. The photon is completely massless. It has no weight, no inherent drag, and no inertia. It is pure, unrestrained energy in motion. Now, imagine if the entire universe operated this way. Imagine if every single quantum field behaved exactly like the electromagnetic field. If we rewind the clock of the cosmos 14 billion years back to the very first, microscopic fraction of a second after the Big Bang, this is exactly what the universe looked like. The infant cosmos was unimaginably hot, small, and dense. And in that primordial inferno, every single ripple, every single fundamental building block of reality was entirely massless. The electron fields, the quark fields, the neutrino fields. They were all boiling with energy, and every single excitation within them was flying blindly at the exact speed of light. It was a universe of absolute, perfect symmetry, but it was incredibly chaotic and entirely sterile. In a cosmos where everything travels at the maximum possible speed, nothing can ever stick together. Electrons could never slow down enough to be captured by a nucleus. Quarks could never linger long enough to bind into protons. If the universe had remained in this state, it would have simply expanded into a vast, dark cloud of rapidly diluting radiation. There would be no stars, no planets, no chemistry, and no biology. But most importantly, in a universe without mass, there is no time. According to the laws of relativity, the faster you move through space, the slower you move through time. When you reach the absolute speed of light, the clock stops completely. From the perspective of a massless photon, time does not exist. A photon born at the beginning of the universe and absorbed by your eye tonight did not experience billions of years. From its own frame of reference, it was emitted and absorbed in the exact same instantaneous moment. A universe made entirely of massless, light-speed ripples is a universe without a past, without a future, and without memory. It is a reality permanently frozen in a blinding, instantaneous present. For the universe to build structure, for it to forge the complex tapestry of life and allow the passage of time to actually be felt, it had to find a way to slow things down. It had to break the perfect, massless symmetry of the early cosmos. It needed to invent a mechanism to pull the fundamental ripples out of their light-speed frenzy and trap their energy. It needed to create mass. This brings us to one of the most profound, deeply elegant, and strange mechanisms in all of physics. Just moments after the Big Bang, as the superheated universe rapidly expanded and cooled, it reached a critical temperature threshold. The cosmos underwent a violent, invisible phase transition. It was much like liquid water suddenly freezing into solid ice, but this freezing did not happen to matter. It happened to the fundamental vacuum of space itself. Throughout the universe, an entirely new quantum field suddenly awoke. It had been there since the beginning, but in the extreme heat of the initial explosion, it had remained highly chaotic and symmetric. But as the universe cooled, this field locked into a permanent, unyielding state. It is known as the Higgs field. To understand why the Higgs field completely transformed reality, we have to look at how it differs from every other invisible ocean in the cosmos. Most quantum fields, like the electron or electromagnetic fields, naturally want to rest at an energy level of exactly zero. When they are empty, they are calm. They only require energy to create a ripple. But the mathematics governing the Higgs field are wonderfully inverted. For the Higgs field, resting at zero energy is highly unstable. It is like balancing a marble on the tip of a perfectly smooth hill. The slightest breeze, the tiniest mathematical perturbation, will cause the marble to roll down into the valley below. When the early universe cooled, the Higgs field rolled down that hill. It collapsed into a new resting state that was not zero. It locked into a baseline energy level that is stubbornly, permanently elevated. We call this the vacuum expectation value. It means that unlike the other fields, the Higgs field is permanently turned on. It is an invisible, high-tension medium that saturates every single millimeter of the cosmos. You cannot pump it out of a room. You cannot shield yourself from it. It is a permanent, underlying texture to the very fabric of empty space. Imagine it as a thick, invisible cosmic syrup that suddenly flooded the entire universe. The moment this cosmic syrup locked into place, the blinding, light-speed chaos of the early universe came to a screeching, agonizing halt. The free ride was over. The fundamental ripples of reality suddenly found themselves trying to propagate through a medium that actively resisted them. But the Higgs field does not treat all ripples equally. The way a quantum field interacts with the background Higgs syrup depends entirely on its specific mathematical coupling, its unique set of quantum rules. The photon, the ripple in the electromagnetic field, is completely blind to the Higgs field. It has absolutely no mathematical connection to the cosmic syrup. When a photon flies through the vacuum, it slips through the Higgs field perfectly untouched, experiencing zero drag, zero resistance, and zero interaction. Because it does not interact with the syrup, it remains completely massless. It is allowed to continue its eternal journey at the absolute speed limit of the universe, untouched by the passage of time. But the electron ripple is not so lucky. The electron field is mathematically tethered to the Higgs field. When an electron excitation tries to travel through empty space, it cannot just slip by. It is forced to continuously interact with the dense, elevated tension of the background syrup. As the electron ripple attempts to propagate forward, it constantly bumps into the Higgs field, triggering tiny, continuous energy exchanges. It is forced to wade through the quantum molasses. This continuous, exhausting interaction requires a tremendous amount of energy. The electron's inherent momentum, its desperate natural instinct to fly at the speed of light, is constantly being sapped and diverted into this invisible friction. The ripple is violently bogged down. This dragging sensation, this energetic struggle against the cosmic syrup, is what we actually call mass. Mass is not a noun. It is not a physical object. It is not a solid, heavy pebble sitting inside the center of an atom. Mass is a verb. It is an action. It is the continuous, real-time process of a quantum field interacting with the background tension of the universe. When you feel the weight of a stone in your hand, you are not feeling the amount of physical stuff trapped inside it. You are directly feeling the mathematical price. The universe is charging those specific quantum fields just to exist within the Higgs ocean. You are feeling the resistance of the drag. This entirely redefines our understanding of what energy is and how it behaves. The famous equation formulated by Albert Einstein, relating energy to mass and the speed of light, tells us that energy and mass are the exact same currency, just existing in different physical states. But the Higgs mechanism gives us the physical blueprint of exactly how that currency is exchanged. Mass is simply energy that has been trapped. When a ripple is forced to wade through the Higgs syrup, a portion of its raw, kinetic energy is effectively frozen. It is locked into a localized area, bound up in the continuous struggle of interacting with the vacuum. The heavier a particle is, the stronger its specific mathematical connection to the Higgs field, and the more of its energy is trapped in this localized drag. The top quark, one of the heaviest fundamental building blocks ever discovered, is incredibly massive, not because it is large, but because it is hopelessly, violently entangled with the Higgs field. Trying to push a top quark through the vacuum is like trying to drag a heavy boulder through a swamp of thick tar. The energy required to overcome that relentless friction is immense, and so we measure its mass as being incredibly high. The electron, on the other hand, has a very weak connection to the Higgs field. It interacts only slightly. It still wades through the syrup. It still pays a mathematical price, but the drag is incredibly faint. Therefore, the electron has a very small mass. It is light, nimble, and requires very little trapped energy to sustain its presence in the physical world. This means that inertia, the stubborn tendency of heavy objects to resist being pushed, and their violent tendency to keep moving once you get them started, is not a property of solid matter. It is a feature of the invisible oceans. When you push a heavy car, and you feel the agonizing burn in your muscles as it refuses to budge, you are literally fighting against the vacuum of space. You are trying to force trillions of localized ripples to accelerate through a microscopic syrup that wants to hold them still. You are pouring your own biological energy, your own electromagnetic intent, directly into the Higgs field, paying the energetic toll required to shift that pattern of trapped energy from one coordinate to another. The car is not heavy. The interaction is heavy. When we finally grasp that mass is merely a consequence of quantum friction, a localized knot of slowed down energy, the existential architecture of our reality suddenly comes into a terrifying, beautiful focus. Because we are made of mass, because the quarks and electrons that forge our chemical biology are hopelessly bogged down in the cosmic syrup, we are granted the greatest and most agonizing gift the universe has to offer. We are granted time. By pulling the fundamental fields out of their light-speed frenzy, by forcing the energy of the early cosmos to slow down, clump together, and struggle through the dark. The Higgs field allowed the clock to start ticking. It allowed the rapid, blinding flashes of pure radiation to cool and condense into complex, heavy structures. The drag of the vacuum is what allows an electron to circle a proton long enough to form an atom of carbon. It is what allows carbon atoms to chain together in the deep, silent oceans of the early Earth. It is what allows the heavy, twisting ladders of DNA to hold their shape, preserving chemical memory across billions of years of chaotic planetary history. We are completely defined by our heaviness. Our bodies are essentially complex, localized storms of trapped energy, continuously fighting a microscopic battle against the fabric of the universe just to maintain our physical form. This means that your consciousness, your ability to sit here and reflect on the nature of reality, is a direct byproduct of this cosmic slowing down. You are able to experience the passage of time, to feel the weight of the past, and anticipate the mystery of the future, entirely because the energy that makes up your brain is forbidden from traveling at the speed of light. Your thoughts, your memories, and your perception of the physical world are built upon the foundation of this quantum friction. We often look at the speed of light with a sense of profound envy. We view the absolute velocity of the photon as the ultimate freedom, the highest physical capability of the universe. We dream of slipping the heavy bonds of our mass, of tearing across the intergalactic void untouched by the slow, creeping decay of time. But absolute speed is absolute amnesia. The light has no memory. It has no structure. It has no capacity to observe the beautiful, terrifying complexity of the void it travels through. To be pure, untrapped energy is to be entirely blind. The sensation of weight, the heavy, dragging reality of our physical mass, is not a prison. It is an anchor. It is the mathematical price we pay to exist as distinct, complex entities within a universe that would otherwise blur into a silent, flashing eternity. We are the slowed-down fragments of the dawn of time. We are the energy of the Big Bang, caught in the invisible syrup, bogged down just enough to gather together, to open our heavy eyes, and to finally look back at the light. If you were tasked with building a universe from scratch, where would you even begin? We have spent generations obsessed with the idea that the cosmos is a collection of things, a chaotic pile of objects thrown together by some ancient, blind chance. But we now know that this is a fundamental misconception. The universe is not a collection of things. It is a rigorous, precise, and breathtakingly consistent accounting of change. It is a ledger that never fails, a system of exchange that governs how energy transforms from one state into another. When we finally gathered our collective knowledge, when we mapped the behavior of every ripple, every force carrier, and every fundamental excitation we could observe in our most powerful machines, we discovered that reality is written in a singular, universal language. We call it the Standard Model. Think of the Standard Model not as a list of ingredients, but as the master blueprint for the cosmic economy. It is the definitive ledger of how energy flows through the fundamental fields. It defines the rules of the trade, dictating how the electron field can dump its momentum into the electromagnetic field, how the quark fields must dance to the rhythm of the gluon ocean, and how every single interaction must balance its books perfectly before the transaction is finalized. It is a framework of almost terrifying perfection. When we use this model to predict the behavior of particles, we are not making vague estimates. We are performing calculations that align with experimental reality to a degree that defies logical explanation. We can predict the magnetic properties of an electron to 10 decimal places, and when we go into the laboratory to measure it, the results match our predictions with such precision that it would be like measuring the distance from New York to Los Angeles and getting it right down to the width of a human hair. This level of success suggests that we are not merely describing the universe, we are uncovering the very syntax of its existence. The Standard Model reveals that energy is not a chaotic, uncontrolled force. It is a highly regulated currency that follows strict accounting rules. Nothing is ever truly created, and nothing is ever truly destroyed. Every flash of light, every vibration of matter, every impulse in your brain is a perfectly balanced equation being solved by the field's dot, however. Even as we stand in awe of this magnificent architecture, we must confront a humbling and profound truth. Our map, for all its beauty and predictive power, is still fundamentally incomplete. We have mastered the accounting of the small, the dance of the ripples, and the economy of the fields. But we have yet to reconcile this local reality with the grander, warped geometry of the cosmos itself. The standard model is a masterpiece of bookkeeping, but it is a masterpiece written in a local dialect. It describes the particles and the forces, but it remains silent on the nature of gravity. Gravity stands apart. It does not fit into our tidy, ripple-based accounting. It does not behave like the other forces, which are carried by discrete messengers flashing through the fields. Gravity seems to be a property of space and time itself, a curvature of the very stage upon which our quantum symphony plays. We have yet to find the bridge between the smooth, warping geometry of space-time and the frantic, boiling agitation of the quantum fields. We are trying to understand a book that is written in two entirely different languages at the same time, and we have yet to learn how to translate between them. And then there is the even deeper, more haunting mystery of the dark. When we look out at the universe, we see the stars and the galaxies, the planets and the gas, the entire luminous, complex structure that we can measure and describe using our standard model. But that entire catalogue of everything we have ever seen, everything we have ever touched, and everything we have ever measured accounts for only a tiny fraction of the total energy density of the cosmos. The vast majority of reality is composed of things we cannot see, things that do not interact with our fields, and things that our master blueprint cannot explain. We see the effects of dark matter, holding galaxies together in a gravitational grip that makes no sense given the amount of visible matter we can detect. We see the influence of dark energy, pushing the very boundaries of the universe outward in an accelerating expansion that threatens to isolate us from the rest of the cosmos. These are not just minor gaps in our understanding. They are massive, gaping holes in our reality. They are proof that our current accounting system, as perfect as it seems, is only tracking the small, visible portion of a much larger economy. This realization should not lead us to despair. Instead, it should fill us with a sense of wonder. To know that our most sophisticated scientific achievement is still only a preliminary draft is an incredible invitation to explore. It means that there is a deeper reality waiting to be discovered, a more unified language that will eventually tie the quantum ripples to the curvature of space-time and explain the dark, invisible oceans that fill the void. We are living in an era of extraordinary discovery, a time when we are beginning to see the limits of our own intuition. We have spent centuries looking for the smallest pieces of reality, only to find that the pieces were never there to begin with. We found only the fields, and now we are beginning to understand that the fields themselves are merely the current chapter in a much longer, deeper story about the nature of information and the nature of the vacuum. If energy is the currency, and the fields are the medium, then the universe is essentially a vast, self-calculating computer. It is constantly processing interactions, resolving the tension between fields, and propagating the complex waves that eventually coalesce into the structures we call life. This is the beauty of our current place in the cosmos. We are the pattern that has learned to trace its own origins back to the source. We are the ripples that have developed the capacity to understand the ocean. When you contemplate this master blueprint, when you realize that every interaction you experience is a perfectly calculated transaction governed by universal laws, you begin to see the world in a different light. The sense of isolation we feel, the idea that we are distinct individuals trapped inside a fragile, biological cage, begins to fade. We are woven into the same fabric as the stars. We are governed by the same accounting rules as the galaxies. We are the continuation of the energy that was set in motion billions of years ago. The future of our understanding lies in the dark. It lies in the unknown, in the places where our equations break down and our intuition fails. It is in the gaps between the fields, in the anomalies we have yet to explain, that the next, grander version of the universe is hiding. And it is up to us, the curious, the conscious, and the restless, to keep listening to the music, to keep measuring the currents, and to keep refining the blueprint. Reality is not a finished product. It is an ongoing, evolving, and endless experiment. And as long as the fields continue to tremble, as long as the energy continues to flow, there will always be more to discover. We are the caretakers of this cosmic ledger, the conscious observers tasked with deciphering the beautiful, complex, and forever unfolding language of the universe. Our journey through this mystery is only just beginning. Every question we answer opens 1,000 more, and every limit we push reveals a wider, deeper ocean waiting for us to explore. It is a privilege to exist in a time when we can see this far, when we can understand this much, and when we can hold the entire standard of physical reality in the palm of our minds. We are the universe waking up, and the dawn is only just breaking. We have explored the nature of the fields, the logic of the interactions, and the profound, boiling reality of the vacuum. We have peeled back the layers of the particle, and we have found the music beneath. We are the symphony, and we are the audience, and the song is still playing. As you go about your life, remember the invisible oceans, the constant, boiling activity of the vacuum, and the elegant, universal laws that bind you to the furthest edges of the cosmos. The mystery is not outside of you. The mystery is you. We have touched on the fundamental nature of energy and the grand, incomplete map that guides our understanding. As we continue this exploration, we will look even deeper into the mysteries of the quantum world. But for now, take comfort in the knowledge that you are a vital, intentional part of this ongoing, universal calculation. The fields are humming, the energy is flowing, and the blueprint is expanding, moment by moment. There is a specific, quiet moment that comes at the end of every day, when the noise of the world recedes and you find yourself sitting in the stillness of your own consciousness. In that moment, you feel like a sovereign entity. You feel like a singular, solid I, a passenger occupying a biological vessel, looking out at a world that stands apart from you. You feel that you are a specific, definable thing, distinct from the air you breathe, the chair you sit on, and the vast, dark emptiness that stretches out beyond the walls of your home. We are raised to believe in this absolute separation. We spend our entire lives defending the boundaries of our identity, defining ourselves by what we possess, what we have done, and how we are perceived by others. We cling to the idea of a fixed, permanent self, like a rock sitting in the middle of a stream. But this conviction, this deep, primal certainty that you are a solid, isolated object, is perhaps the most beautiful and effective illusion in the universe. If you follow the thread of physical reality all the way to its origin, if you strip away the biology, the chemistry, and the atomic structure, you do not find a solid, permanent core. You find only the trembling of the fields. You find only motion. When you look in the mirror, you are not seeing a thing. You are seeing a standing wave. You are seeing a highly complex, exquisitely organized pattern of excitations propagating through the universal mediums. The atoms that make up your physical form are not the same atoms that were there 7 years ago, nor will they be the same atoms 7 years from now. Your skin, your blood, your neural architecture, they are all in a state of constant, relentless flux. You are a river, not a rock. You are a process, not a product. You are a verb, not a noun. This perspective shift, while initially unsettling, offers a profound sense of liberation. To realize that you are not a static object is to realize that you are not bound by the limitations of a static identity. You are a participant in a grand, continuous energy exchange. You are a localized nexus where the fundamental fields of the universe have converged to create a momentary, self-aware pattern. You are not just observing the universe, you are the universe observing itself. Think about the sheer, improbable history required to construct the pattern that is you. The energy that fuels your heartbeat, the fields that vibrate to form the electrons in your nervous system, the very atoms that make up the structure of your mind. This energy was forged in the hearts of stars that died billions of years before you were born. It was scattered across the cosmos, swirled into gas clouds, cooled, and eventually coalesced into a complex, self-organizing shape. That shape learned to extract energy from its environment, to repair itself, to replicate, and eventually to think. The universe was dark, chaotic, and unthinking for almost all of its existence. It was a vast, mathematical storm of energy exchanges, expanding and cooling without anyone to witness its grandeur. But then, through the slow, agonizing process of organization, the energy began to fold in on itself. It learned to map its own environment. It learned to track the passage of time. It learned to wonder. In the form of you, the cosmos has developed a way to look back at its own beginnings, to trace the path of the light, and to contemplate the nature of the fields that carry it. You are the universe's way of understanding its own structure. You are the energy that has become conscious of its own motion. This realization fundamentally changes the way we perceive our own mortality and our place in the cosmic order. We are accustomed to fearing the end, fearing the dissolution of our pattern. We view the return of our energy to the vacuum as a tragedy, a loss of the self. But if we are indeed ripples, then we must understand that the ripple is not the water. The water is the reality. The ripple is simply the temporary, beautiful manifestation of the water's agitation. When a ripple subsides, the water remains. The energy that constitutes your consciousness, your memories, and your personality does not vanish into a void of nothingness. It returns to the deep, fundamental oceans of the fields, where it is recycled, redistributed, and eventually used to create new patterns, new structures, and new ways of experiencing reality. There is an incredible, haunting beauty in this transience. If we were permanent, static things, we would be stagnant. We would be unable to evolve. We would be unable to change. It is only because we are temporary, only because our patterns are fluid and subject to the relentless turnover of the cosmic economy, that we are able to grow, to learn, and to experience the richness of existence. We are a part of a much larger, much deeper history, a history that began long before we arrived and will continue long after we are gone. We are a chapter in a book that is being written by the universe itself, moment by moment, excitation by excitation. Consider the implications for human connection. We feel isolated because we look at the world through the lens of our biological separateness. We think that your field of experience is entirely cut off from mine, but there is no gap in the fields. There is no empty space between the people we love and the world they inhabit. We are all ripples on the same universal ocean. When we interact, when we speak, when we share an idea or a touch, we are literally merging our energetic signatures. We are harmonizing our vibrations. We are participating in the same continuous dance of force carriers and field excitations. We are not strangers passing through a vacuum. We are entangled, overlapping waves in a shared cosmic symphony. This understanding also offers a new way to confront the challenges and the anxieties of the modern world. We often feel overwhelmed by the complexity of our lives, by the pressures of our environment, and by the uncertainty of our future. We feel small in the face of the vast, cold emptiness of space. But if you truly internalize the lesson of the quantum fields, you realize that you are not small. You are not insignificant. You are the culmination of 14 billion years of physical development. You are the most complex arrangement of energy in the known universe. The vacuum is not a hostile, empty space. It is the very medium of your existence. The forces that hold the atoms of your body together are the same forces that govern the structure of galaxies. The energy that flows through your mind is the same energy that fueled the Big Bang. You are the cosmos in miniature, a perfectly tuned, self-aware echo of the primordial explosion. In the final analysis, we are not the masters of this energetic flux, nor are we its victims. We are its manifestation. We are the way the energy chooses to organize itself when it is given enough time, enough space, and enough complexity. Every breath you take, every thought you formulate, and every action you perform is a testament to the fact that the universe is not a dead, mechanical machine. It is a vibrant, creative, and endlessly generative process. We are the evidence that reality is capable of producing wonder. As you go about your life, try to hold on to this perspective. When you walk through a city, when you sit in a forest, when you look up at the night sky, recognize that the boundary between you and the rest of the world is a mental construct, a necessary illusion for biological survival. In reality, there is no boundary. You are leaking into the environment, and the environment is leaking into you in a constant, invisible exchange of energy and information. You are part of the process that is unfolding right now, in this very room, in the space between your skin and the world. We have explored the nature of the particle, the hidden architecture of the fields, the boiling, restless energy of the vacuum, and the elegant, universal laws that bind us to the cosmos. We have journeyed from the microscopic interactions inside the atom to the expansion of the universe itself. And we have found that at the heart of everything, there is no solid, separate thing to be found. There is only the music. There is only the energy. There is only the motion. The mystery of what we are is not a problem to be solved, but an experience to be lived. It is an invitation to engage more deeply with the world, to appreciate the exquisite complexity of our own existence, and to recognize that we are part of something much larger, much older, and much more profound than we can possibly imagine. We are the energy that has woken up. We are the fields that have learned to speak. We are the ripples that have learned to wonder about the ocean. Hold on to that sense of wonder. Let it color the way you see yourself and the way you see the universe. You are not a visitor in this reality. You are the reality itself, momentarily coalesced into a form capable of understanding the source of its own existence. You are the energy that has become aware of its own beauty. And as long as the fields continue to tremble, as long as the symphony continues to play, that awareness is the greatest gift the universe can offer. The story does not end here. The universe is still unfolding, and the blueprint is still being written. There is so much more to see, so much more to understand, and so much more to experience. But for this moment, in this space, let this realization be enough. You are here. You are conscious. You are the energy of the cosmos, dancing in the dark. Thank you for embarking on this journey into the nature of reality. It has been a pleasure to explore these profound questions with you. Keep looking, keep questioning, and keep seeking the truth beneath the surface of the world. Good night, and see you in the next video.